rise of technology firms has been the single biggest driver of growth in the U.S. over the last decade and a half. It has helped propel iconic companies from Facebook to Salesforce and Trulia. But while the bro culture of Silicon Valley is only just beginning to be explored, there's new reporting on the women who are funding these giant companies. In today's Bloomberg Equality, our ongoing conversation about the bottom line impact of diversity, I sat down with Julian Guthrie. She is author of Alpha Girls, the women upstarts who took on Silicon Valley's male culture and made the deals of a lifetime. We talked about Julian's goal in chronicling these women's stories.
I started getting names and casting a wide net, and then interviewing the women, and I just gravitated to certain women's stories.
The four women you end up profiling in Alpha Girls played critical roles in creating new companies and creating the companies they're in, but they're not household names like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Sergey Brin. Do they want to be household names? Is that the only way to change the narrative from something that is male-driven to something that's more inclusive?
That's a really interesting question. I think that they didn't set out to be household names. I think now, because of the book, and the book is being adapted for a television series, that will really broaden the story and commercialize the story. I think that they're really proud of their stories. They were very reluctant to tell their stories in a lot of ways. I think that you really have to be brave to be vulnerable. And for women had been very much, these women who worked in this male-dominated industry, and this speaks to industries, across the globe, really, but they had not sought out the spotlight. And they had been these outsiders who had found their way into this industry, and they had to learn to play by someone else's rules before they could start writing their own. They had to go from navigating to trailblazing. So they didn't set out to be in the limelight. Now they're at this place in their lives where they want to show what's possible. They want to show that tech can be a great place for women. Venture capital is a really important industry. There is something to be proud about in seeking to make a lot of money, to build companies. It's very important for women. Both of those industries are really great, in particular for women, for young women, to change kind of this power dynamic.
Are they just more secure in themselves that they're in a position to throw caution to the wind and say, you know what? Whereas before I was a little bit scared to put my name out there, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm going to go for it.
I think that it's a combination of things, that they reach this point in their lives and their careers where they do have the credibility, they do have the money, they do have the success stories, the companies that they have built. And there's also this zeitgeist now, this moment in time, this call to action for men and women to pursue equity. And so I think the women of this story, I see this as the biggest business issue of our time, is this issue of equity. And I think that the women now are very proud of their stories and of telling their stories. Again, it was very hard to get them to tell their personal stories. So to tell their success stories of building, helping to build Salesforce or Trulia or grab the Facebook deal, or, those were more of a reporting challenge, just getting it right. But getting them to tell about the broad sides, what happens when you come down, when you're diagnosed with cancer, what happens when you're adopting a baby at the same time, what happens when you as a woman make more money than your partner or your husband. So all of those things were more difficult, but they were such an important part of Alpha Girls and telling that story.
How do you think the Me Too movement played into this at all? You talk about the zeitgeist. We can't ignore the fact that Me Too has been happening, and it's taken down a number of prominent men. Did that factor into people's thinking? Was that kind of in the backdrop the entire time?
I started my reporting before the Me Too movement really became this galvanizing force, and I thought that women would be much more at ease in telling their stories, but that wasn't the case. I think it helped because there is this community, there is this network. People are being held accountable like never before, thank goodness. But at the same time, they're still working in this industry. These four women, MJ Elmore, Sonia Perkins, Magdalena Yashil, and Teresa Gao, they're working in the industry. They are, in the trenches. And so they still are working in this male-dominated industry. So how much can you speak out? How many names can you name? How personal can you be? What happens if you do appear vulnerable? How are you going, it's such a networking industry where the networks are key to get the deals, and when still 92% of all check writing VCs are men, so you have to be collaborative.